Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thank you so very much for tuning in. This is sort of an emergency update. I was able to get Bob Kudla from Trade Genius back on the line to discuss what sort of feels like the beginning of the end. And I don't want to blow it too far out of proportion, but what we're seeing globally now with the coronavirus is really scary stuff. Italy sealing its borders, China shut down, and now the ripple effect is hitting us as we predicted it would. Bob, welcome back. How are you?
I'm good, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I know you're surviving these markets and profiting. We're going to show people a couple of your charts and winning trades here in a second. But first of all, today's plunge of the stock markets. This quote from Zero Hedge: if all of a sudden Korea and Japan had to shut down borders and now Italy, now it looks like the global economy screeches to a halt. Today, the Dow down 1,031 points, NASDAQ down 355. That's a 3.7% plunge. S&P down 111 points. Gold is up at $16.61 an ounce, and silver is around $18.72 per ounce. Bob, we've been talking for a very long time about a potential end to this rosy economy, perhaps an end to the fiat dollar, perhaps a global economic collapse, and that was before coronavirus ever came along.
Yeah, Sean. I mean, look, this is, I kind of joke to people, there's kind of two viruses going around right now. We got the coronavirus and then we got the Bernie Sanders virus, so the market's starting to start to sense a secular change here. And look, you and I have been talking about this forever. Gold has no choice but to go up because it's not being debased like the fiat currencies out there. And same with silver and platinum, palladium, and rhodium. I put them all in the same bunch. So they're all doing great. And at the same time, this is the worst possible scenario you can have for a market. It's called a supply shock. At the same time, you're locking your customers up inside of their homes and apartments and condominiums. So, the Federal Reserve and the central banks around the world, they don't have any tools for that. That's basically what's called a demand collapse. And at the same time, you're having a supply shock. And so this is really unprecedented grounds. It's almost like a war is happening in every country in the world at the same time.
Well, and nobody wants anybody to panic here, right? This isn't the end of the world yet. But you can see how our civilization is so fragile and our economy is so interconnected globally with other nations that even if it doesn't get terrible here, like we're seeing in Wuhan, China, and other spots in the world, we are going to feel the ripple effects. So I think what I do want to do, given today's decline in the stock markets, is show people some charts you sent me because you guys are doing well and profiting despite the downturn in the markets. You've got this CCL short, that's Carnival Cruise Lines. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your strategies are to make money in these terrible markets?
Yeah, so what we've noticed right away, we said, what would happen if if this coronavirus really escaped China's shores? And then lo and behold, we had that cruise ship. We affectionately called it, basically it's a petri dish, right? And is people aren't going to take cruises. And so when we went ahead and did is we recommended to our subscribers that they should consider taking what's called a put option position in Carnival Cruise Lines or any other cruise lines. But we picked Carnival. And then today, basically Carnival collapsed with the market and we profited 340% on that trade. But it wasn't just the ships. We also shorted the chips because I think in your opening monologue, you talked about Zero Hedge talking about, Japan and Korea closing their borders, but they're closing their chip factories down too, Sean. And same with Singapore and China. And so we went ahead, there's an ETF out there called SSG that rises when chip makers stocks start to fall. And we took advantage of that one too. There's no options on that, but in 3 days, we made a quick 15% on that. And we've always been bullish on gold because China's going bust. China's not going to survive this. A conversation for another day. But China is printing like there's no tomorrow. And the amount of fiat being pushed into the system can't help but have gold. Gold's next move, after a little bit of consolidation after this last nice move, it's going to all-time high, Sean. And silver's going over 20. they've already lost control of the platinum, palladium, and rhodium markets. So those moves will tell us what gold and silver are about to do, because all those stocks, all those metals have doubled already. And so gold and silver, look, they're out of metal in those warehouses, no matter what they tell you. And another kind of demand push for gold again is going to send these prices rocketing. And what's going to go along with that will be the gold and silver miners are going to enjoy unprecedented gains when our central bank decides that they're going to have to lower interest rates again. And now they're talking about, going from no interest rate decreases to now maybe one even in April, Sean. So they're running pretty scared right now. But I agree with you. This isn't the panic move. We're going to probably get a relief rally here in a couple of days with some fake news. And then we're going to have what I call the long goodbye. That's going to be the sell-off going into probably into the June second quarter earnings reports, when people realize that a lot of these companies haven't been making money, and now they don't have cash flow and they can't buy back their shares, and it's going to cause a cascade in the markets. But that moves to come. We're going to get a bounce before that happens.
Let me show you this chart here. This is Apple. So Apple's got their Foxconn factories over there in China completely shuttered. So no iPhone production, no Apple laptop, MacBook production. And Apple's down 5% today. Now, Apple's had such a run since 2002 or 2003, probably the number one stock out of all stocks. So it is a big deal to see it lose 5% of its value in one day. For those who don't know how to trade options, what are you guys offering over there at Trade Genius? Can you hold people's hands on how to do this, to buy these puts in Carnival, for example?
Yeah, so what we do is that at Trade Genius, we educate and we inform. But in addition to that, in addition to all the training that we do, we have chat rooms that are open 24 hours a day, Sean, 7 days a week. And all those trades that I shared with you today, I shared with our subscribers in the chat room. So we walk people through, how to do those trades. We remind people is that if you're uncomfortable taking them, don't take those trades. But we show people how they can leverage these buy and sell signals with options, where you can get 5 to 10%, 5 to 10 times the move you can get on a stock move. And we're very careful about the ones we pick. We try to put the odds on our favor in order to make sure that people profit from them. But absolutely, we would show people how to do that. And in fact, I have training courses to talk to people about how to do basic options and how to do some of these advanced trades as well. And if you don't mind, I put some specials together for you too, Sean. If people want to get some stuff that's pre-discounted, we did bundles 65% off for your listeners if they take advantage of it by the end of the month, which I believe is Saturday night. And if they just want to pick and choose different things off our store shelf, they can get 40% off, and we're still using the promo code Valentine's. But yeah, absolutely, we'll teach people how to do that. And I'm in the trading rooms all day. So, we put a trade on today that we're looking to profit from in 3 weeks. I help people walk through how they should do that trade. And that's how I do in all the trades.
All right, Bob, well, let me ask you this. If a Harvard professor says 40 to 70% of people in the world will be affected with COVID-19, because he says asymptomatic nature of the virus means it will ultimately not be containable, is that not the worst case scenario? We're seeing people panic in Wuhan. We're seeing young people say they don't want to be alive anymore. I've seen video of young people jumping out of windows of high-rise apartments. It's one of the damn scariest things I've ever seen, and I don't want to spark a panic. I don't want people to be panicked. I want people to be prepared. But if you can imagine, Bob, things getting even a quarter as bad here in this country as we're seeing in Wuhan, some of the inner cities in this country are going to melt down.
Yeah, I'm trying not to overreact to it too. I think we're all in a position of not knowing what we don't know. Why is Wuhan acting differently than what we've seen in other places around the world so far? Is there something else going on that we're not aware of? I understand some of their sanitation issues are pretty profound over there, number one. But this thing about getting infected more than once is kind of scary. And in fact, that this thing is has a latency up to 24 days is kind of scary too. And in my personal view is that I think we're going to muddle through get into April and May where these viruses typically die down because they don't like the radiation and they don't like the heat. But I think next fall is probably going to be, people are going to be on tenterhooks because this virus will then be everywhere in the world ready to lift its head, and it's going to hit probably all at once. And so I hope they're doing some sort of Manhattan Project on a vaccine, because if not, it's going to be, people are going to be living in their caves next year.
Well, listen to this, Bob. You mentioned Wuhan, and why are things unraveling there far faster and maybe in a different way than we're seeing elsewhere? I posted this excellent video from Dana Ashley at SGT Report and at the Phaser. I have it stickied at the top of SGT Report right now. Must watch: COVID-19 pandemic aided by weaponized 60 gigahertz 5G rollout across China. Evidently, Bob, Wuhan is ground zero in China for 5G. It's everywhere. And the information shared in this video is quite alarming about what 5G does to the cells of a human body. We know there's dangers of 5G, which have been ignored in this country by the FCC. 5G is being fast-tracked all over the planet. And what's happening in Wuhan raises the question about a bioweapon meeting 5G to essentially drop people in their tracks. I would suggest everybody watch that video. Again, it's over at the Dana Ashley channel, and it's stickied at the top of SGT Report. Very frightening stuff, Bob, and we don't know. You're right. To your point, we don't know specifically, but what we're starting to realize is this thing was created in a lab, and whether or not it was released on purpose, it's doing the job that they wanted it to do when they made the damn thing in a lab.
Yeah, I mean, what they say, it's either 3 or 4 swapped out proteins, in the cell structure. So, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to me. And yeah, this 5G thing, I just read an article too about how they've underplayed the radiation levels that people are getting, especially Apple phones, but Samsung's phones are even worse in terms of don't put these phones near your head. And I can imagine 5G is probably, is that on steroids. And it's interesting to see. I wonder if the 5G, the signals going all across the world is activating the virus. I mean, 5-10 years ago, you couldn't get me to believe any of this stuff, Sean, and now it's tomorrow's news.
That's right. And you're probably familiar with the fact that Event 201 was held by Johns Hopkins, the World Economic Forum, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation just before this pandemic began, Bob. And their Event 201 was an exercise about coronavirus, a pandemic sweeping the globe. So don't you find that just a bit ironic?
Yeah, and also the theft of the Canadian samples and aided by a Harvard chemist. There's just too many things for it to be a coincidence. And so, yeah, I mean, look, these same people are want to depopulate the world, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking for a way. I just saw the mortality rates too. It's basically, if you're over 65, it's pretty high in terms of normal, like, viruses go. But under 55, there's no mortality.
Well, Bob, I don't want to burst your bubble, but recall that whistleblowing doctor in China, the young guy who was telling everybody this thing is far worse than officials are saying. He got the coronavirus and died, and he was in his late 30s or early 40s. And other doctors who have been providing care in Wuhan, young doctors have gotten the virus and they've died. So it's scary because, to your point, the flu, for instance, doesn't usually kill strong, healthy, middle-aged people or young adults. It kills the very old or the very young. And this thing, in many cases, Bob, appears to be taking out strong, middle-aged, healthy people.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. I was going to say it was 0.5%, but these guys are knee deep in it too. What I don't like about it is the reinfection rate of this thing, and then that myocarditis where it just drops people dead.
Yeah, you get no immunity to this thing. If you have it and you overcome it, you can get it again. It just speaks to the nature of this bioweapon. And, let me go back to this screen share. I should have just read this synopsis from Dana. This is why people should watch this video, because her thesis and then the science that she shares to back it up is quite alarming. She writes, "Is this truly viral or is it 5G? China has unleashed 60 gigahertz all throughout the country, with Wuhan as the pilot city. Unbelievable comparisons to symptoms showing, as a virus, compared to what happens when one is hit with 60 gigahertz waves and its impact on the uptake of oxygen via the hemoglobin. This specific frequency is absorbed by oxygen. 60 gigahertz causes the rotation of the electrons around the oxygen molecule to spin, thus inhibiting the ability of hemoglobin to properly uptake these oxygen molecules. Bob, this is such scary stuff, and it might speak to why we're seeing some healthy people in the streets just literally fall on their faces, fall flat and die.
Yeah, and probably why we're not seeing it other places yet. You know, and it's funny, and the World Health Organization was bragging about China's 5G today. It's almost like they're encouraging the world to move forward with it. And that's pretty scary too.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I want to ask you something here. Let's just say this thing all blows over in the next 90 days. That might be the best case scenario, is that this thing is contained or we see the numbers begin to plummet and life is back to normal in the next 90 days. What if, however, this thing isn't contained? And what if we're still talking about this in 6 months and China is still shut down, Bob? Because whereas you and I and others I've talked to have been concerned about debt and debt service as being the ultimate black swan that'll bring down the global economic house of cards, what happens when factories are shuttered, economies are shuttered, and the debt can't be serviced because nobody's making any money and no products are being sold?
Well, I mean, you know, at that point, they can either usher in a new, you know, currency regime, number one, number two, debt jubilee, or number three, we all go down to martial law everywhere. You know, I just, you know, it's such a, it's such a, you know, a, you know, it's such a small chance a month ago that was even a possibility that people have to start even thinking about what's even involved there. You know, all the central bankers this weekend just went absolutely bonkers about what they're standing ready to help. You know, people were joking like, what, can they create a vaccine? You know, so they may be trying to prepare something in terms of creating some sort of authoritarian kind of approach. But look, if China goes offline, China is now 30 to 40% of a lot of people's trade. I mean, there's going to be countries that literally will not be able to function without Chinese imports. And in the U.S., where we're vulnerable is with our drugs. We get so many of our drugs manufactured over in China, and people probably aren't even aware of the drugs that they're taking. You know, I'm talking about pharmaceuticals that aren't they may not have access to them if this thing continues the way it's going. You know, but my view is I think it will die down, but I think next year is when we get really hit with it. Almost like what happened with the Spanish flu. This thing doesn't go 1 year; it'll go in waves. And summertime, these viruses typically fall unless this thing is designed to not, and then your scenario plays out.
Okay, Bob. Well, let me just do this again. I want to do another screen share, and this is from a video I put up just the other day. Emergency update. Will you survive if quarantined? And I just want to play a little bit of this for you, Bob. It circles back to Bill Gates and these billionaires that are very, very much into the idea of depopulation, or should I say population control, but essentially they want to depopulate the world. Listen to this. In 2009, the secret meeting in New York between billionaires Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, David Rockefeller, Eli Broad, George Soros, Ted Turner, who's always said the world is overpopulated, Oprah Winfrey, and Mike Bloomberg, among others, claimed there was no agenda, but an article in the Times of London headlined Billionaires Club in bid to curb world population. It was revealed that one of their topics, including the topics of healthcare and education, was slowing the global population growth. The article said, taking their cue from Bill Gates, they agreed that overpopulation was a priority. Now, evidently, Gates, Buffett, and Ted Turner have been quietly worrying about a Malthusian population problem for years. This article in the Wall Street Journal says, Gates, in February of 2009, outlined a plan to try to cap the world's population at 8.3 billion, rather than the projected 9.3 billion to which the population is expected to peak. Now think about that. Gates, whose father was a eugenicist and who was on the board of Planned Parenthood, wants to cap the world's population. How are they going to do that? I'll pause it there. Could you hear that, Bob?
I could.
So it's stunning. Not only did they talk openly, and this meeting was held in secret in 2009, but some of the most diabolical people in the world, Ted Turner, David Rockefeller, Bill Gates, met in secret to talk about depopulation. And the question I posed there is a very real one. How do you cap the world's population? How do you do that, Bob?
Well, you cap it by killing people. I mean, look, Bloomberg's on record of talking about old people should just do their duty and die.
That's right.
So I'm not surprised, whatsoever. Look, these people, look, if they can rip babies out of the womb, what are old people, right? So, and that's where the problem is economically, right? It's the cost of the social programs, and China doesn't have one. So this is a very convenient way for China to eliminate a drag on their economy is to wipe out their elderly populations. And the interesting thing about it is the Western world that's elderly, the emerging nations or the non-emerging nations are all very young. So this is all part of this anti-West, capitalist, anti-Christian movement by these people. None of those people believe in God. They believe they're gods. And so so I'm not surprised whatsoever. I just, when I always said, hey, what's the easiest way for them to do it is to have some sort of virus. I just wish I wasn't so right.
Yeah, it's actually a worst case scenario. It's really the sum of all fears, I think, as Tom Clancy put it. It really is, because the point I made before, Bob, is that an economic collapse is bad enough. When your money can't buy anything, right? That's bad enough. But to compound that with the worry of a pandemic and worry about your family getting sick or people that you love dying, it is really the sum of all fears. And I guess I would make this point. This thing could be used to round up dissidents in China. In fact, that's probably in part what it is being used to do. Now, if you remember what the Weather Underground said, what Bill Ayers proposed, they proposed re-education camps. And by their own estimates, they proposed having to exterminate as many as 20 to 30 million Americans who couldn't be re-educated. Now, imagine this thing unfolding the way it is in China with Hillary Clinton sitting in the White House. Imagine what she might use it for. Would she round up her enemies, her political enemies? It's plausible.
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, and if they have you all in your home, it's easy for them to control you too. So they try to scare us with climate change, and now they're going to try to scare us with the this pandemic. And I wouldn't be surprised if all those people are already vaccinated, in terms of giving themselves immunity, one way, shape, or form.
Let me ask you this, and it's pure speculation as to whether or not there will be a vaccine for this thing. How do you feel about a vaccine for coronavirus? They're going to scare the hell out of everybody on the planet. And then what happens when they usher out a mandatory vaccine?
Yeah, we don't know what's in it.
Yeah. Well, we know what's in the vaccines that they push on our children. Ingredients like formaldehyde, aspartame, aborted fetal tissue, mercury. So it's already a witch's brew, and I mean that quite literally. It's a witch's brew of ingredients that I believe are designed to harm, not help our kids. And now they've got adults, they've got people all over the globe very concerned about coronavirus. It's just a multi-pronged attack that could be used for a variety of different reasons by people who are profoundly evil, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're seeing the book of Revelation here unfolding, because it's not just this, there's going to be food shortages coming from this as well. And, it's just pretty sad. And then with food shortages come wars. But I just have to take it a day at a time, Sean. So we'll just have to keep our eyes open and try to make the best decisions that we can, because I think this thing surprised a lot of people. There's probably very few people in the know on this. And, the only thing that's weird to me is President Trump seems to be very, very calm about this whole thing.
All right. Well, look, there's no need to panic yet. Again, the stock market, that's just ones and zeros on computer screens. So the Dow being down 1,000 or even 5 or 10,000, that's not the end of life as we know it. But total panic in your neighborhood, in your town, that really is a game changer. And that's what's happening across Italy as store shelves are running empty as the virus spreads, sparking panic buying of food and masks across Italy. So I would just suggest to our listeners, go to your local Costco and, get a few bags of rice and get some water and start to prepare now. You're much better off having it and not needing it than needing it and not having it. So
yeah, and my view is that, look, until they shut the stock market down, try to profit from all this stuff, and also don't forget toilet paper at Costco.
Yeah, good point, Bob. All right. Yeah, the bare necessities, those are the things you're going to want to have on hand in case you have to, quote unquote, shelter in place, or even worse, be subject to a mandatory quarantine. That's when things really get scary and all bets are off. And only those who are fully prepared are going to survive that scenario, especially if it plays out for any length of time. All right, Bob, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I think we covered it all, but thanks for having me, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. And guys, I really appreciate y'all tuning in. We're going to keep our eye on this story and report on it probably bi-daily, if not daily, because it is such an important story. It could be the Black Swan event that brings down the House of Cards. So thanks for tuning in, friends. I'll leave that link to Trade Genius below this interview. And for Real News 24/7, you guys can visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless you one and all. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
The 1 mile radius between MIT and Harvard is the center of the deep state. Every evil starts in the 1 mile radius between MIT and Harvard. And I know these guys, I've figured them out.